it's interesting that you asked that, because the only time I ever really think about those types of questions is when I'm forced to for grad school.
That's a healthy way to do it. My way is like I wake up in the morning, I'm like, do I have free will?
Dear Shandy. Welcome to Dear Shandy, everyone. We have a very exciting guest today. Mm-hmm. It's a big deal. It's a big deal. I cannot tell you how many times over the years I have been asked by blog readers or like in Instagram DMs what my Enneagram is. And I will confess, I spent many years not really paying much attention to it. And I was like, I don't know what that is. Like, it's one of those personality things. And then when I did dip a toe into it, I was like, whoa. And so it is like the perfect match made in heaven that we would have the author of The Enneagram in Love, which it ties into the fact that this is a relationship podcast, but also the fact that we love talking about personalities. It's just all the perfect things.
Puzzle piece.
Stephanie Barron Hall, thank you for joining us.
So glad to be here with you today.
We're very excited to have you. Where to begin? Why? Okay.
I would start by saying, how does one get into the Enneagram business?
That's true.
Oh my, it has been kind of a whirlwind, to be honest. So I have always been fascinated with personality. So I got a bachelor's degree in psychology, like a lot of people, and I just got really into it. And actually a few years ago, a few different people were like, oh, you should get into the Enneagram. I'd say that was like 2015. And I was like, oh, we'll see. And I just started reading about it and really got obsessed. I mean, like you're saying that so many people have been asking you about your type, right? Yeah. It kind of becomes a little bit of an obsession. So it just all started from there. And then I started my business that I have now in 2017.
And your business now, can you describe it? Because I know that this is what you do. Mm-hmm. So can you just tell people what your day looks like?
Sure. So yes, I'm an Enneagram coach, meaning I have a certification to coach individuals. So I do typing sessions, meaning I meet with people and talk them through finding their type. I also have a podcast called the Ask an Enneagram Coach podcast, where people ask me all sorts of questions about the Enneagram. I also have an Instagram page called 9 Types Co. And I basically use that to educate people on the Enneagram, personal development, relationships, things like that.
We're going to have a lot of overlap in listeners, I think. Because like I said, my blog readers have been asking me this for such a long time. Mm-hmm. And it is interesting to me how there are 9 types, mm-hmm. but I felt very spoken to when I read my type, even though 9 doesn't seem like that large a number of types. Can you explain why, like how that came to be? Like I know
the 9 types.
Yeah, well, I've read your book, and there's the history goes further back than I expected it to. Mm-hmm. But I guess what I was surprised by is feeling like this resonated more with me than, say, Myers-Briggs, which has 16 types. Mm-hmm. So do you think you could try to explain that?
Sure. So I think what really gets to people with the Enneagram is that it is about motivation. So a lot of personality types or personality tests are really about behavior, and they kind of focus on what's external. But when you get down to the motivation level, you're really looking at things from a different perspective. And what I think people really resonate with and hate about the Enneagram is that it really gets to the blind spots, or like the shadow sides, like those things about yourself that you're like, ugh, I thought I was hiding that really well, or I hate that about myself. I don't want anyone to know that. It really uncovers those things. And so that's part of the personal growth piece, I think, of the Enneagram, is that, you're looking at those blind spots. You're looking at the negative sides of yourself and working from there to grow.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I did, against your wishes, take the test.
Uh-huh.
I'm sorry.
We should say it. We should mention briefly that in the book you do suggest, well, you say to hold the results of a test loosely, to
yes.
not, yeah. Andy totally took it.
I was going to take the test.
Yeah.
Sorry, sure. I disobeyed you. But my curiosity about the test, and I know that you actually do in-person Enneagrams, so that's probably more effective, but is that within the test itself, I feel like there could be like a circular reference. So in other words, like the actual test taking itself is like a meta version of what your actual Enneagram is. And then you get into like this like big data set, like what are you analyzing within the analysis? But I felt like as much as I think part of maybe my id or my subconscious knew the answer, I felt myself consciously veering against certain things that I was possibly ashamed of or, scared of, or like, oh my God, am I that person? No, I can't have this result be that. So I'm going to move one notch over to the right or one notch over to the left. And I was just thinking like, within the Enneagram analysis, is there an analysis of the pattern of question answering that actually analyzes the type of personality that would answer those questions in that slightly false way based on certain patterns? So like, let's say like question number 52 is like an easy softball where it's like, everyone's going to be like, oh yeah, I'm this, easy. Or like question number 3 is also easy. And then you take those two and you say, well, if they're these, there's a 99% chance that they're lying about this question. Does that make sense?
Know what Andy's type is based on this question?
I'm so neurotic. It's unbelievable. That's what I am. Whatever the most neurotic out of the 9 is, like I win. But I overthink things.
There's a lot to that. And I think that's what actually a lot of the time the tests miss. So there is a test that I do like called
I remember
IEQ 9.
Yeah, the most thorough, but also the most expensive.
Yes, right.
Yes, I have it earmarked.
Yeah. So it's like $60. But what's fascinating about that test is it basically it does have a logic to it. So as you take the test, then it chooses questions to continue to ask you that get more and more specific. So what's interesting is that you end up being able to narrow in on your type a little bit better because it's not just a random order of questions. It kind of does have that logic.
Oh, I
piece.
see. Right.
But there's also something to it where it's like, depending on how quickly or slowly somebody answers the questions, that can also mean maybe they weren't really reading them or maybe they were overthinking them. So, either extreme.
That's interesting. Yeah, I kept going back when I was taking the test. I kept thinking every question I was thinking of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. I was just like, if I'm observing this test, the test is already wrong. So anyway, I'm sorry. I may be different.
It was fine for the first 2 pages. He kept like asking me. He was like, "Do you think I blah blah blah?" I was like, "I can't. This is you.
Yeah.
I can't help you."
Yeah, but I have 2 me's. I have the objective me and the subjective me.
Absolutely, yes, it is telling.
Yeah,
and you do have a point. Like if one of the questions is like, I am often the victim.
Yeah.
The kind of person that often feels like the victim is not going to say I am often the victim.
Of course.
Typically.
Sure. Right.
So
and then some people might, overreact, go completely other way and be like, oh no, I'm the exact opposite.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. I find test taking about yourself fascinating.
We're not very good self-reporters.
No.
And that's why I liked how in your book you did say, you pretty much recommend just reading up on it and seeing what you identify with best. Okay.
So that's enough of that. We would like to know, what would we like to know? You tell her what we'd like to know. Because I'm talking too much in this podcast. Go ahead.
Well, do you want us to tell you our types or do you want to guess?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, only because here's something I'll tell you. A lot of the time people meet me and they're like, what's my Enneagram type? And I'm like, well, I can't really tell just by meeting you, because you know yourself best. And that's like one of the things, even when I say I don't recommend tests, it's because I want you to trust yourself in knowing yourself. And I want everyone to cultivate that sense of inner knowledge because that's what the Enneagram is about. So,
and reflection, which it does make sense. Like it sort of makes you work a little harder. It's not as easy as just doing a 6-page test and being like, oh, this is my type.
Right.
Like the whole point is self-discovery and self-improvement.
Yep.
And learning things about yourself that are, in my case, pretty uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the key word. Yeah.
Yeah.
So based on the conversation so far, what are we? Come on, you should know this.
Admittedly, I have heard some rumors. So, Sharleen, what type are you again?
I am a 4.
Why are you telling her?
Well, I had told Gabby.
I want this to be like a mind reading game.
Well, she doesn't know yours.
Okay.
But I am
She knows
4,
mine now,
and
trust me.
I thought my wing was a 5, but then I got to the end of your book where you said that that like the second highest number you have is not your wing. Huh. Can you explain wings? I don't get wings.
Well, sure. Okay. Go, Andy. What is your type? Do you know?
I want you to tell me. Look at me. I'm obviously.
He's a 5.
Okay, I'm a 5.
Okay.
At least that's what the test said, but I lied a lot on that test.
Yeah. So that would have been one of my guesses.
Nice.
So the way the wings work is it isn't the second in line basically, but in your case, a 5 wing would make sense because it's one of the types on the either side of your core type. So think of it. This is so cheesy, but it helps people. It's like a chicken. The wings have to be attached. So like the wings are adjacent, attached. So if you're a 3, you can have a 4 wing or a 2 wing.
Oh, I thought it had to be a cross.
Yeah, I think that. So one of the other things that can happen that is a bit confusing is the lines around the Enneagram. So like if you look at the symbol itself, you see these lines that are connecting the types. And those are actually stress and growth lines. So basically there's a pattern that the types move in when they're stressed and when they're feeling safe and secure and growing.
Okay.
And so that's what those are.
Interesting.
Okay. I feel good about that.
Yeah.
So 4 and 5. Are you feeling like you're not a 5? Like when you read that, does that resonate, or is it like
there was a lot of it that resonated.
It was eerie.
Yeah.
But I will confess, when I was reading about types, and I feel ashamed of this, but I thought I would know my own husband's type from reading them.
Sure.
And I guessed in my mind that he was an 8.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
Just sort of that more assertive and like confident thing. But I do realize when I think about it that is sort of a side of him.
Yeah.
But probably not his truest self. But then I felt ashamed and like, I don't know my husband. I didn't tell you this.
You really don't.
Yeah, I mean, it can be really tough. I mean, it's because when you're looking at core motivation, one, we're not really used to thinking about that or looking at that really, or identifying that in ourselves. And then when you're looking at it, even once you start to understand it about yourself, it's actually hard to see in somebody else. It's really a challenge.
Thanks, Stephanie. I feel bad.
Yeah, I mean, but we have to go back to core motivation, right? So the 9 different types have 9 different core motivations. And anytime we're reading a description, often there's something about the behavior that's built into the description. So I think it's really helpful to go back and to really self-identify with what's underneath it. Like what's the driving why behind what you're doing.
So, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but based on what I've read, the core motivation of a 4 is to sort of find their true self and feel understood and sort of seen. They tend to feel like misfits somewhat. And I felt so lame. I was like, oh, it's so true.
Yeah, you really are.
If there's only 9 types, that means a lot of people feel like misfits and I'm not so special.
Yeah, you're a solid 4.
Oh, I was just going to say like that feeling of like, oh, I don't like this, or like I've been found out. I think everyone feels that when they find their type.
Well, it feels, I felt uncomfortable with like, am I at like a computer? Like I'm like a computer. I'm just like a program. It's just like, I have no choice but to be the thing that I am.
Which I will say is saying something, because Andy is notoriously not, he doesn't drink the Kool-Aid with these things. I'm just going to say that. Like you've never met someone who knows less about like astrology and horoscopes than you.
Yeah.
Like he really doesn't actually have a funny story that has nothing to do with
I just know that Scorpios are bad, and I'm a Scorpio. So every time I'm a Scorpio, everyone's like, oh.
I have a hilarious story.
Yeah, no one's ever like, oh, that's nice.
I have a hilarious story. One time I was like, you know my sign, right? And he was like, no. And I was like, why don't you guess? And he was like, he's like, what letter does it start with? And I was like, V. And he was like, what's the second letter? And I'm like, I had to get to VIR before he guessed Virgo.
He's like, oh, Virgo.
Yeah, that gives you an idea of how much stock he puts into
astrology,
universally relatable things.
Astrology is far different from
I
this.
know,
This is
but my
based
point is
really in
that, like,
psychological.
even I think more so than Myers-Briggs, when I made you take that, this, you related to this more.
Oh, totally, yeah. I mean, there were things in there that were eerie, how similar they were to me. So I buy it. It was uncomfortable.
It is.
But what Stephanie, you specialize in is how the types can complement each other and understand each other better and just sort of work in romantic relationships, correct?
Yeah.
So, do we
I have
work?
so many questions based on this. I want to know how you... Yeah, first let's talk about us, and then I have so many questions about how you went on this process, because I just feel like you must have just interviewed like hundreds, if not thousands of people.
Yeah. I mean, so first I'll say, yes, any type pairing can work together, right? So I don't think that there are certain types that are more compatible or less compatible. I think every single relationship requires a good amount of effort, a good amount of empathy, personal growth, compromise. I mean, all of those things are really important to me.
Okay, I'm interrupting you to ask this question because I wrote that down. You said there's no such thing as most compatible and that any pair can make it work if they're willing to put in the effort. But did you not... I'm sure that there were more common pairings that you came across, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So as long as you put in the effort, but would you say that some pairings might require more effort?
Yeah, I think the least common pairings are same type pairings. So I did some research. Actually, when I was researching for the book, I got about 700 participants in my research, and basically asked them, like, what is your type? What is your significant other's type? What is like intimacy look like for you? What does that even mean to you? How often are you intimate? All these types of things, right? So I asked all these questions, and the statistical significance was that same type pairings are least common, and then there are certain type pairings that are most common. So those would be 1 and 9, very common, 2 and 5, 2 and 8, and then basically every type with 9. So like, yeah,
everyone loves
so
9s.
9's just great.
Everyone loves 9s.
Everyone loves
And I think I also had a lot of 9s respond to my survey. So I think that was skewed slightly, but the least common pairing was 8 and 8 and 7 and 7. So those type pairings have a little bit of a harder time.
So that's interesting, because I would have thought that people who are super similar would get along better. Like, I feel like we are very similar in many ways. Yeah. And that's kind of why we work.
Yeah, is the key to be similar but different?
Yeah, because I think what people run into is when they're so similar with their significant other, it's like, you're kind of annoying, actually. And they don't realize that they're actually annoyed with themselves.
Right.
That's an interesting observation.
Well, it's a reflection of your faults.
Yeah, but I would have thought, it's not that I don't see the ways in which I can be annoying, but I would have thought that if I duplicated myself or cloned myself, that I would get along with me great.
Well, I guess, yeah, I think the same. Like, I guess it comes down to, do you like yourself, right?
Yeah.
If you really like yourself, then you should be able to have a relationship with the opposite sex with your female or male self.
Yeah, and obviously cloning yourself is not the same as dating another human being.
Usually not, yeah.
Yeah.
Unless you have good cloning.
That's very interesting. Okay, so 4 and 5.
Yes.
Yeah, what do you think about that? Are we going to last 6 years, 8 years, 10 years?
I mean, you can last however long. I mean, here's the thing about 4 and 5.
Endorsement.
That was the best answer.
I really feel strongly that it's about like if you want to, and you want to put in the effort. I think 4 and 5 is actually fairly common. And one of the reasons is because there are a lot of similarities, right? So 4 and 5 tend to both be deep thinkers, really imaginative, cerebral. They actually are pretty deep feelers as well. 4 is more so than 5s. 5s sometimes kind of, it kind of depends on the 5. Some 5s are really deep feelers, some 5s not so much. But they both, 4 and 5 both love like kind of like interesting things. Like they don't love the run of the mill stuff. They want things to be a little bit more interesting or intriguing.
We like interesting things. Sorry, go ahead. It's true.
Like apparently we both like interesting things.
Basic, they're like, oh no,
we want to feel kind of special or different. Yeah, I guess that's true. We so do, but I also feel like that's so annoying. Like, I wonder if that's arrogant to think that you're different and off the beaten path and not basic,
Yeah, I guess it's all about the ego. Like, do you need to feel different? Is there some reason why you feel the need to feel different, or are you just different because you're born that way? I've often wondered that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is something with 4s and 5s. They kind of want to rebel against the way that other people see things, the ways that other people think about them.
And what's that rooted in? That's what I want to know. What's it rooted in?
Well, it always gets back to motivation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think.
Right.
Do you remember your motivation?
Sorry, I don't.
He doesn't remember his motivation.
It's fine.
I did bad homework.
All he remembered literally was 5.
5. I mean, that's the great thing about them all being numbers, I guess. But for 5s, it's the core motivation to be competent and self-sufficient, and really like self-reliant. So for 4s, I'd say they want to kind of do something different. They want to go against the grain in every way possible a lot of the time.
It gets back to that feeling unique, like that being that individual, which I relate to in like a squirmy way. It doesn't make me feel good deep down at all.
So what are you?
She's a 3.
I'm a type 3.
3. So is a type 3 most likely to get involved in types?
I mean, actually, what's so funny is type 4s, I feel like, love the Enneagram so much. 3s are motivated by the need to find their worth in how others see them and in their productivity.
Huh.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. So were you
so
really,
it's all about
really
success and
like, were you like really like, I am going to publish a book. I don't care if it kills me. I'm getting this book published on Enneagrams.
That is basically the energy with which I do everything. It's exhausting.
You are going to be very successful and very stressed out.
Who else is a type 3? I don't know how familiar with the Bachelor world you are, but Nick Viall is also.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. I think it makes sense.
More importantly, Albert Einstein is a type 5. Just wanted to make that known.
There you go. Well, and that's too like, so with 5s, like going against the grain, I feel like it's really about knowing more than everyone else and researching things more than everyone else and just believing that everyone else is just like a lemming basically going along. And you're like, but actually, here's the thing. Like I had a carpool buddy for a long time who was studying philosophy and was a 5. And so we'd have these conversations because he would just be like, oh, and there's this and there's this. And he just thought about things. And even if he hadn't been studying philosophy for academia, I think he still would have studied it because he was fascinated by it.
Can I tell you something, Stephanie? It's torture. It's a lifelong torture. Yeah. It's not good to be a 5.
The thirst for knowledge.
I have my wonderful 4, so it served its purpose.
I do feel like it. Here's the thing: is I feel like being a 4 is exhausting, but then I look at you and I'm like, God,
it's worse.
He knows something about everything, which I feel like is probably common.
Yeah, this part about the ants when they were looking at the ants pile that really. resonated
yeah, in
with
one
me.
of the write-ups we read, it was like observing an ant pile, and I was like, Andy has totally observed many an ant pile.
I've literally done that. So can I ask, are you in a relationship? Can I ask?
She's married.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm married.
Sorry, I'm a terrible host. I didn't brief my husband at all. I just threw him to the wolves.
Totally.
No
God.
background
All
at
I know
all.
is I'm a 5.
But what I don't
Which doesn't
know,
sound good, by the way, unless you're talking about enneagrams.
I don't know what your husband is.
Yeah. Okay. So here's something that might make you feel a little better, Sharleen. So when we first got into the Enneagram, he was like, I'm a 1. And I was like, okay, cool. I read it. I was like, yeah, it checks out,
Mm-hmm.
And then after a while, he was like, actually, I'm a 5. And I was like, okay, yeah, makes sense. Then he was like, he listened to me teach the Enneagram one time and he was like, you know what? I'm an 8. And I said, okay, that really checks out,
Yeah.
And now he's like, oh, actually, a few months ago, I was like, actually, maybe let's look at type 1 again. I think you might be actually a type 1. So now he's like, okay, I'm a type 1.
Wow. Is there like a shapeshifter enneagram type where you're just like
Well, that's
constantly
type
moving?
3.
Oh.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So we know he's not a type 3, but I think for a lot of people, it's actually really hard to figure out that motivation piece. Like it's kind of, you have to do a lot of self-discovery, and a lot of people aren't that into the Enneagram, which is fine, but it just takes them longer to find their type if they're really interested.
What kind of people typically are not into it? I'm curious because to me, it's like the best. It's so self-indulgent in the best way. And if you're at all reflective, then you're like, I can improve, why, what type is least into it? Is that a thing?
Ooh.
Yeah. I mean, I think 5s often are least into it.
They're interested in everything.
It's interesting because I'm not into like astrology is like the furthest thing of anything in the world that I'm into, but I actually am into this. It scares me, but I am into it because I believe it's rooted in actual real study and real fact. It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are just as I said, like programs. You're like, whether you like it or not, you can't fight it. You are who you are, and that's it. You do things according to a program.
Yeah.
Usually.
You know what I find interesting is that you said your husband first identified with 1 and then 5 and then 8. So Andy got 98. I know the test doesn't mean that much, but 98% 5.
I cheated on the test.
He got 96% 1. And I thought before he took the test that he was an 8. I just think that's interesting. Like there must be sort of similar-ish motivations.
5 and 5 and 8 are very similar on paper because they both have this real need for self-reliance and autonomy. So that can be why. Energetically, they're very different. 8s typically have a bolder, brasher energy, and 5s typically are like more cerebral.
Okay.
Can I ask you this? Do you have a firm understanding of the process that makes the number? Like, do you understand what the, environmental pressures that create a 5 or an 8 or a 3? Or...
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting. This is like somewhat debated. There are a couple different schools of thought. One, I actually ascribe more to the idea that you're kind of born with your type. And then we have these early childhood experiences that solidify it. And those become what we call childhood wounds, which it's not intentional. It's not like a parent intended to wound a child, but really things happen. And because of the way we already see the world, they confirm something in us. And that kind of solidifies it.
Wow. So it's I would have guessed it's more nurture than nature, but wow.
Yeah.
So we're just set from the
but that's the
die.
same. Like I have 2 sisters and we're all so different, but we were nurtured by the same parents. Like a lot of this is just you're born with it, and then like you said, it kind of gets shaped.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
Fascinating.
I was just going to say we have these thought processes that we kind of learn. And in Enneagram language, they're called like unconscious childhood messages, like things that we were told either literally or gathered from our environment that are actually really harmful or hurtful to hear. But then there's like the opposite as well. So there are these healing messages. So for type 5, the healing message is your needs are not a problem. Like you're allowed to have needs and in the world and be comfortable in the world.
He's pretending to be nonplussed right now, but I can tell it.
No, I'm plussed. I'm fully plussed.
You're fully plussed.
Yeah, because I don't want to malign my parents, but there was some resistance against some of my needs.
Yes.
And I understand. I'm not faulting them.
Yeah.
I understand why.
Wow, that got very deep.
I can't say much because I know my mom listens to this. She's going to be so upset. She was wonderful.
Oh my God.
She's the best mother ever.
Didn't I?
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Well, sure. But also, like, I think that, yeah, I mean, my parents have to hear me talk about this stuff all the time. And I'm like, oh, my childhood wound is such and such, but it's like, I fully believe that even the best, most well-intentioned parents, sometimes like we just gather things from our environment and then we need these messages. So for type 4s, there are a couple different ones that we talk about, but one of the really hard things for 4s is they're kind of afraid of being too much or not enough. Which
that makes sense.
I don't know if that resonates with you.
I guess I feel like that's a really deep one to sort of wrap your mind around and apply to yourself. I definitely resonate more with the feeling misunderstood, constant. The reason I even have a blog is, was to sort of take control of my own narrative and try to be understood. So that's to me what really speaks to me, but feeling like too much or not enough. I can see that because I'm very conscious. I hate asking for favors. There are very few friends I'll confide in.
Yeah.
That I really see you as a dear, dear friend when I'll ask you for a favor or call you and just talk about myself for
right. That was a question about that.
Yeah, because I have a tendency to sort of almost like a social crutch, ask a lot of questions and like I'm very much there for other people, but that's how that I value someone is when I'm willing to take, I guess you can say.
That's true.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, so then with that obviously makes great podcast hosts, because you ask a lot of questions. But for type 4, the healing message is you are seen for who you are.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. It's going to get emotional.
Enough
You're
about
like,
us.
all the feelings.
Yeah, seriously. But I found it really interesting when I first read my Enneagram and then thought about Andy's and just sort of how we relate. Because we do get along, like you said, like there is a lot of similarities there. And my birthday was a couple of weeks ago, and Andy's always terrified when it's time to get me a gift because apparently I am next to impossible to buy for. And I'll admit I'm not the most... It's not so much I don't like this.
She's not understood.
It's more so...
Yeah.
Like, how do you not know what I want for my birthday?
No,
like, do you not know me
it's
at
more
all?
so...
That's what it is. Whatever she says that's what it is.
No, instead of like, I don't like this, it's more so, how could you think I would like this? Like, do you know me at all? Like I have a bit of a history with all my boyfriends of gauging how well they know me based on how, and I'm not even like a gift person really, but it's more so that, this is your chance to prove to me how deeply. Yeah.
So do you think that's like a 4-5 dynamic that you're like,
I don't know.
I think so because I overthink your birthday resident stress about it, and then you don't feel understood, and you.
But when he nails it, it's like.
Which is like once every.
Yeah, but
like
it's I like cry. Like I can't. I give very good reaction when he nails it. Like it's just that sense of like. How did you nail it so hard? So
I
it's
don't
like
remember that ever
so
happening.
Feeling seen.
But okay. Apparently I nailed it one time.
I was going to say that's just one of the challenges too, though, with it being, you're similar, but the 5 is so much more like logic and like thinking focused. And the 4 is so much more like feeling and heart focused that can be a real challenge because there are times when it's like, I don't get this about you.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of the way, like when we do have conflict. Although I do think that I'm, for a heart type, I feel so proud when I know these terms. But Andy's a head type and I'm a heart type, correct?
Right. Mm-hmm.
I do think that I'm pretty heady for a heart type.
Yeah, you're very heady heart type.
But when we fight, I think the biggest problem, but then we do solve it pretty good because I think we just sort of met later in life and learned about our flaws and how to resolve conflict. Yeah. But I think what happens if I'm in sort of just the mood is slightly off and then something happens, it feels like the straw that breaks the camel's back, even though it's not really. Mm-hmm. And I have I sort of just have a really big reaction.
Yep.
And then he gets defensive.
Yep. I do that well. I get defensive very well, by the way. I'm good at that. Strong defensive talents.
Does this all check out to you?
Yeah. No, yeah. That makes sense. And it can be hard too because, I don't know if you guys have this dynamic, but a lot of the time with fives in conflict, they're like, okay, let me keep this as logical as possible. And let me isolate, figure this out, think through what I have to say, and then come back and say it. And
totally true.
Yes. Yeah.
And then the four is like, let me be as authentic as possible and get my feelings out there. Like, I just want everyone to know how I feel. I'll clear the air and then I'll feel better once I share my feelings. But then when those feelings aren't mirrored because the five is staying logical, then it's like, well, are you not getting me? Like, are you not understanding what I'm feeling? Are you not listening to me? And that's kind of where things can spiral a bit.
Fives are pretty annoying now that I think about it. Am I annoying?
I mean, I think I am more reasonable in that situation. Like, you just get your feelings out. You might as well address it head on and then have a conversation about it.
Sounds exhausting.
Meanwhile, you have to go and ruminate.
Yeah. So true.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting because there are certain types that have like these different conflict styles. So my type, for example, type 3, also does like I'm going to think about it. I'm going to try to stay logical, not let it touch my feelings, and try to figure out this puzzle. So I totally am like, that's kind of how I go to. And then when I'm in a conflict with somebody else and they don't have that same style, it's like, oh, wow. Okay. That is annoying how I do it, or it is annoying how they do it or whatever. It's just always interesting to notice those things.
That brings up, okay, since your life is, revolves around Enneagrams, do you feel like it's a self-fulfilling prophecy? Like when you're in an argument or you're finding yourself behaving in a way that, might not be to your best look, do you actually think like, okay, according to my Enneagram, this is why I'm doing this and I do this and that. And you're like, okay, stop doing that. Stop being your Enneagram. Do you actually like take like internal coaching from it as you're like in the moment?
I mean, it would be really perfect if everything in my life was really neat and tidy like that. But like,
are you a robot?
I am a robot.
Okay, good.
I think that what it's really taught me is not so much to filter everything through my type necessarily in the moment, but to be just a little bit more aware of what is going on in the back of my mind. Like when I'm in a conflict and I'm like refusing to share my feelings and I'm just trying to find the right puzzle piece to get out of it, I can kind of be like, okay, I'm actually not letting this touch my feelings right now. And that's actually not helping in this situation. So how can I bring more awareness to what I'm actually feeling? That type of thing. So it's not so much about like, what is my type, but it's more so just about just trying to bring a little bit more awareness. Or if I don't, and it goes terribly, right, I can think back to it later and kind of analyze it and understand what went wrong and figure out a different way. Because I think that noticing portion is probably the hardest part, but I think it's really necessary to actually grow and move forward.
I think your husband's really lucky. You sound like a very, very cool,
reasonable, so
and like
reasonable.
Constantly growing spouse.
Yeah, what's your worst quality? Like, what's in a relationship? If I was
what's your worst quality?
What would your husband say is your worst quality?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, he would definitely say workaholism.
Oh, come on. That's a cheating.
Andy has a gripe with.
Yeah, that's like in an interview. Like, I'm a perfectionist. Yeah. Everything I do is perfect.
Andy thinks it's not a real
I
flaw.
want a better fault. I want a better fault.
But you did ask what her husband would say.
Okay, that's true.
Her loving husband would say.
Okay, what would Stephanie say?
I mean, honestly, my worst quality is that, in my opinion, is that I'm very like, out of sight, out of mind about everything. So like if I don't have something right in front of my eyes, then I will forget it, which is a problem in a relationship when you have a spouse who's very thoughtful and like remembers stuff and is like, hey, will you, turn on the dishwasher? And I'm like, sure, no problem. 2 seconds later, forgot it. And then he's like, you told me you were going to do that and you didn't do it. And I was like, I forgot. I'm sorry. And he just like doesn't understand.
Have you ever been in a long distance relationship? And if so, did that affect it?
It did indeed. Mm-hmm.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
Well, I mean, out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Totally.
Yeah. No, I did. Actually, my husband and I, we were long distance for about a year and a half. But
he stuck.
Yeah. I mean, it was like a nice time apart for us.
Distance makes the heart.
Yeah. We've been together now 10 years. So it's like, and yeah.
We really believe in a little bit of space. And so normally in non-COVID times, I am a singer. And so I do freelance work and I'll leave for a contract for anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks at a time. And I got to say, it's great for a marriage, in my opinion.
Oh, I think in every marriage, someone should be an opera singer. There'd be no divorce, none.
Yeah.
It just makes the time you have together, a bit more special. And but that said, neither of us are threes, so we're not forgetting about each other.
That's true.
Well, I don't know if that's a 3 trait,
I just leaped.
Or if
that
it's
was
just
such a leap.
Mine, because I feel like a lot of 3s are like so on top of things, and I'm just like,
you're on top of the thing in front of you.
Yeah, right. I just have too many. I have too many things on my plate. That's probably what it is.
There was another thing you said in here with 4s and 5s that, I mean, it hit us big time when you said areas to work on. Both 4s and 5s can hesitate to take action because they feel the need to process decisions thoroughly before moving forward.
I can't even pick a color if you said like there are like 5 rugs and I need you to choose one, I would have to go to a psychologist. Like I'd have to get therapy.
We do have a hard time. We're not great at sort of pushing the other one over the ledge, like making, especially like together making.
Yeah, we're the most indecisive people.
Yeah,
it's always like, what do you want to do? What do you want to do?
It took us like 4 years to decide to renovate.
Yeah, we're not good at decisions.
Yeah.
Very bad. Both of us.
We tend to look at all the reasons why it might not be the right time. We're very much like...
Yeah. I mean, so there's another way. So about the heart triad, the head triad, body triad. So there's another way of looking at the triads. So with the Enneagram, obviously there are 9 types. So there are all these different ways of breaking them down into groups of 3. And 4 and 5 are both in what's called the withdrawn stance, meaning that they lean on thinking and feeling to process through life. And it's not until all the thinking and feeling run out that they get to like the action. Like, okay, now's the time to make that decision. Now's the time to do the thing. So they can just end up doing that ruminating thing, processing it.
I've been ruminating for like 40 years.
That makes I don't like that about us at all. But I do think not to pat.
But it's nice to be with someone who has the same faults in that respect.
Yes, but not to pat my own back. But I do think I'm better than you.
Yeah.
Like if it weren't for me, we would never take vacations. We would never.
I don't think we would have done anything.
We certainly never would have renovated. Yeah. I don't mind change. I sort of feed off it, but I definitely crave it once in a while. That's why we change like our wall color once in a while.
I don't even dress myself anymore. I mean, that's not even a joke. Like we just go to shopping. I'm like, just pick stuff. It's over. It's over.
You have become more and more useless since I've met you.
Totally useless. Yeah.
Well, it's like if somebody else will make this decision for me. Great.
Yeah.
All my problems are relieved. I just have someone here.
Yeah.
But after reading about the 5's type, I now recognize that that's a sign of love for me because it means that he really trusts me and he doesn't trust many people.
That's
right?
True. 100%.
Yeah.
I'm like, right, Stephanie, right?
Yes. 5s have a very close circle of people that they trust and like let inside.
Yeah. Question, Stephanie. Do you believe in free will?
Oh God.
I know. It's such an annoying question. Such a 5 asking question. Typical dick.
Let me get my ethics book out really quick. I can read about these different philosophers. I think I do. I mean, in terms of like determinism versus like, do we actually choose anything for ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
What do you believe?
I've struggled with this. This has been a major existential struggle of mine for my entire adult life.
That's so like 5 of you.
It's totally 5. The thought of having no free will is terrifying to me. It's also kind of liberating in the sense that like whatever I do wrong, it's like, well, that's not my fault. I mean,
wasn't meant to be.
It was written. Yeah. It was written that way. But at the same time, it creates an incredible meaninglessness of life and existence. Like if you really aren't at all in control of the keyboard, you're just kind of being, pushed by the wind. But I think that is a very 5 thing to think. And it's a very 5 thing to be tortured by. Although I do think it's a legitimate thing to be tortured by. And anyone who isn't is not on the right page.
So it's interesting that you asked that, because the only time I ever really think about those types of questions is when I'm forced to for grad school.
That's a healthy way to do it. My way is like I wake up in the morning, I'm like, do I have free will? So that's not the
well,
way.
Because she's a 3, she's like, it's not productive. Like, why would I?
Of course.
I'm acting like I know you. I don't actually know if that's the mindset, but it does to me as a 4. I'm
starting to think that 5 is the shittiest Enneagram.
That's what everyone thinks about their own type, I think, is the thing.
Is there a shit? Well, we know that 9 is the best.
Yeah, what's the shittiest Enneagram? Let's be real here.
Well, why don't we go through them? Like, let's give it like a sort of simple rundown of them for any listeners.
I want to know what the worst one is.
Yeah, and as she goes through them, she'll tell us which one's the best and the worst.
I think it's whoever you don't like that day.
Oh, she has clients, remember?
No. So yes. So type 1, they're motivated by the need to be good and to have integrity. And so probably their biggest fault is that they tend to be really overly critical and judgmental of themselves and of others. That's type 1. So 2s are they're motivated by this need to be loved and wanted. And probably their biggest fault is that they just forget to take care of themselves because they're so busy making sure everyone else is like helped and nurtured. God.
We always joke that that's like, I work too hard. I care too much for others. It's like not a real flaw. But okay, 2s are fine, I guess.
Until you meet someone who actually is that way and you're like, oh no, you need to like take a break and say no every now and again. They can have no sense of self, which can be a real struggle.
Okay. I'm feeling for them a bit more then.
Yeah. No. So type 3s are, like I said, motivated by the need to find their worth in their productivity and really in how others see them. And I think the 3's biggest fault is that they just care way too much what other people think about them. Like they would be way happier if they just didn't care as much.
Yeah.
And would sleep more, I think. When it works hard.
Speaking autobiographically.
Yeah, right. Okay. So type 4s are motivated by the need to find their true heart, to really feel understood. And when I say find their true heart, what I really mean is they're looking for their identity. They're on this like inner quest to find who they really are. And I would say 4's biggest fault is that they can kind of get caught up in mourning the way that life isn't. They think that there's a way that life could be, and they end up mourning.
Yeah. I mean, that hits me really hard. My biggest fear in life is regret. And so I tend to base all my major decisions based on that. And so just like because I want regretting. Yeah. It's why I'm an opera singer. I was like, well, I don't want to one day regret not having pursued this talent. So I'll become an opera singer.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of an extreme decision.
Got a very strong FOMO.
But it's like extreme FOMO. What could be.
And some fours end up not actually doing anything about it and then just end up in regret their entire life, Ooh. So that, it's scary, right?
Yeah.
Opera.
So the type 5s are motivated by the need to be competent and self-sufficient. And probably their biggest fault is I think that 5s think that they don't need anyone. And so they think that they can calm their own anxiety by gaining more knowledge and information. And
it's so true.
It's so true.
Yeah.
You're relating her.
It's scary.
Yeah.
It's lonely.
It is lonely. Yeah. Why do you do that to yourself?
I mean, I have you, so.
Now you have each other. So then type 6, 6s are motivated by the need to be safe and secure and to be in community. And probably their worst fault is that they often really are focused on the worst case scenario. So they're constantly running through scenarios in their mind of like what's going to go wrong. And that's a real challenge.
That sounds awful. That reminds me a bit of you too.
Yeah, I feel like I have a little 6 in me. Only the bad parts.
You pretty much have like all these like neurotic traits.
I have the bad parts of every number in me. It's great. Yeah. Fun.
So type 7s are motivated by the need to be free and to chase down opportunities. And their worst fault, I think, is probably that they don't really take time for the present. So they're running into the next thing. They're doing the next opportunity, and they just don't even see where they're at sometimes, and see just what's already available to them sometimes.
Gotcha.
Then type 8, they're motivated by the need to protect themselves from betrayal and control. And I think 8s they kind of get a bad reputation a lot because they can kind of be a little bit brash and people don't like that as much. But I love 8s. I would say their fault, though, is that they tend to kind of put up too tough of an exterior to where the other people don't get to know them like they'd like to.
Do you relate to that at all?
I have every fault of every number. It's unbelievable. Is there something that encompasses every single fault, but none of the positives of all the...
No.
I'm not even kidding. Anyway, go ahead.
I thought you were an 8, but in a good way.
I'm only an 8 in the shitty way. Anyway, sorry.
So 9, the best one that can marry anyone, apparently. Although anyone can marry anyone, but a 9 has the best success.
Yeah, 9s are motivated by a need to be at peace internally and externally. So their biggest fault, I would say, is that they forget to think about themselves, and they'll just kind of go along to get along with everyone else. And then they wake up and they're, maybe they're 35, 45, and they're like, oh, I've never actually asserted my own opinions.
If they even have that moment, I guess.
Right. Sometimes they don't.
I think we know a couple of those.
A couple of 9s?
One, yeah.
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah. What is because you have clients and you help them, I guess, figure out their type and how to improve, correct? I don't want to make assumptions. What is the most difficult type to diagnose?
Probably type 9. I'd say they come to me most often just not knowing their type. Type 6s are also really tough because 2 6s can be extremely different. They're just really, really different from one another. In general, it's really hard when people haven't done any sort of self-observation or inner work at all, and they try to find their type. And I'm like, you need to get to know yourself better, because I'm not like a genie. I can't go inside your brain and figure you out. You have to like be honest with yourself.
I can totally picture people coming in being like, tell me.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Like, do you have actual like hour-long sessions? Like, is it more like a life coaching or more like what's going on there? Yeah,
it's more like life coaching. So basically I have questions that I ask, and I help guide people, it's normally when people are like, I've listened to podcasts, I've read books, I don't know what type I am. They're like, these are the weird things about me. And so I just basically observe things and ask them questions. They tell me stories about themselves, and I kind of make observations from there and help guide them to their type.
And do you have clients that like you see like for long periods of time, like every week?
Actually, typically I focus on, so I have a master's in organizational communication. So I focus on that side. So I wrote this book about love, which is really just interpersonal communication, essentially. And so I mostly do team trainings. So I'll coach teams on how to communicate better, or how the Enneagram can help them with their leadership or with their stress management, things like that.
Very cool.
So do you have another book coming out, or is this one and done?
Not at the moment. Oh my gosh.
But she's at 3, so it's definitely going to happen.
Oh yeah. It's going to happen. She can't stop. I know her type.
Stop.
So before we wrap, are there any wise words for us as we continue on our marriage?
Yeah. Where are we going to have problems?
I mean, I definitely think that you guys are already working on them, right? Because just noticing like, oh, we both tend to think about things and be a little bit what's also called past oriented. So you look at the past as a reference for how things will play out in the future.
Who doesn't do that? I mean, isn't that just the way to do things?
So types 4, 5, and 9 do that.
Okay.
The other types have a different pattern. So for example, my type 3, very much is future oriented. So I don't ever even think about the past. I just think about the future.
Oh my God, I want your brain.
I know, that sounds fantastic.
It's exhausting. We're all exhausting in our own brains. Let me tell you.
That's comforting.
Yeah.
That was really. Oh, any other tips, marriage tips, or do you think we're gonna make it?
No, you guys are great. And I think too, just like even talking about this, right? I think learning about yourself and talking about yourself, and having this common language is really, really helpful.
You know what it is? It's like the love languages on crack.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It goes beyond just like, I feel loved with quality time. It's like, oh, I know what your motivation is.
Yeah.
And then what that means and how you're treating me and how I should feel based on how rare that is. You know, it's
like a flow chart of that.
Yeah.
I think
Very
it's helpful.
cool.
It's really
definitely
cool.
Very much
it's really interesting. I could honestly talk
Andy.
with you about this for an uncomfortably long time.
Yeah.
So we
analyze it, you know.
Yeah. Stephanie, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. That was great.
Anyone interested, the book is The Enneagram in Love, and I highly, highly recommend. Learned a lot about myself, and more importantly, how we interact and how to help us move forth. Stephanie, thank you. That was just delightful. Very
Thanks so much for
informative.
having me. I had a great time.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
So, how do you feel about that?
That was really interesting.
I don't think I've ever gotten you to reflect. Here's the thing. You're a reflective and, like she said, cerebral person, but I feel like you're not the type of person to be to stew. I feel like that it's
Well,
not
I really,
your instinct
to be honest,
do that.
when you brought this up and you explained it to me from a very, 30,000 feet level, I thought that I wouldn't be, I wouldn't be into this. I'd be like, oh, whatever, that's hokey stuff. But I feel like this is really based in a lot of psychological study.
Yeah, and
it makes sense. It actually disturbs me how much it makes sense. I would have liked it to not make sense. I would have liked my type to be something where I'm like, oh, that's nope, wrong. Okay, bye.
Yeah, like Scorpio.
Oh yeah, Scorpio. Ooh, Scorpio.
Yeah.
But that was really interesting. She's great. I mean, she's gonna.
She knew her stuff. Can you imagine how many things she knows? She knows everyone's type, everyone's motivation, everyone's faults, and how they can improve, and then how they all interact with each other.
I kind of wanted, but there were so many questions I had. I kept throwing, I have 100 questions for her that weren't asked, and I kept kind of trying to squeeze them in. But I really wonder if she, in the moment when she's meeting new people,
Yeah.
or I guess she's met her partner, but in the past, like when she's meeting, I guess she's been with him for 10 years. So actually she's never met, but I'm saying when she's meeting people in general,
I totally wonder
is she like, does she have like this separate little like
it's
eye?
like it's like totally filing away things.
Yeah, it's like Seinfeld used to say that when he's like in life, there's always like a separate little Seinfeld looking at the joke and whatever's happening. It's like he's present and then there's like the joke watcher looking for like, where's the premise here? Where's the joke? But I feel like I wonder if when she's in a social situation, it's like she can't resist.
How could she?
But
I feel like for sure that's got to happen.
It seems,
but I also maybe though that is a 4/5 thing to think about. Like maybe a 3 is like,
what isn't a 5 thing to think about? To analyze everything. It's torture.
You do seem to be very.
But you love me for that, right?
I mean, I love you because you're like, it really does work because you are such a thinker, but you're also far less emotional than me. So you balance out that side of me. And I did read this and it's cute because it's so true. Like I make you stop and smell the roses a bit more.
Oh, that's true.
Like you get very like
you
kind of
really
riled
do.
up.
You really do.
Which I did not even think was something I was like I don't consider myself like living in the moment, appreciating the small things person, but next to you, I'm like big time like that.
So I just basically make you feel better about yourself that you're not as neurotic as me.
No, you make me feel seen.
Oh,
I do feel seen by you.
I see you.
Yeah.
I do.
But then I have to admit, when we watched back our vows, I felt like watching back our vows. I remember your vows being very, very beautiful, and they are very, very beautiful. But I remember thinking, I feel like my vows saw you more than your vows saw me.
I know, it's true. But my vows were focused like more on humor.
Yeah, your vows were so beautiful, and they were conscious of the fact that we had like guests.
Yeah, I didn't want to be too serious.
Yeah, you clearly noticed things, but ultimately went for the overall package in that. And I was like, who cares who hears this? Like mine was so like, this is what I see in you.
Is that a 4?
Well, because I'm so obsessed with being understood, it stands to reason that I would be, I think I do it all the time. Don't you think I'm constantly showing you the little ways in which I see you?
That's true. Sharleen, I'm talking to you, I guess. Sharleen.
Who are you talking to?
Sharleen, you always point out that you are seeing me.
Oh, in like a self-congratulatory
like
way?
Almost like in a way where you're like, you don't see me as well. Like you're like, you see how I see this thing of you?
It's like in a guilt trippy way. That sounds awesome.
Oh yeah. There's been many times where she's like been like, I see you so much better than you see me.
Well, to be fair, I've been like that with every boyfriend, and I feel the most seen by you out of all of them.
Yes.
Like I feel about as seen as I think I'm going to get. And then by the time I'm fully seen, I feel like all the other things about that person I'm going to not like.
Right.
Does that make any sense?
That makes total sense.
Yeah. Oh God, I sound terrible. Like so neurotic.
I know.
And self-absorbed.
So self-absorbed.
Like, it's like, I think I'm so fucking special. Like, don't you understand how unique and special I am?
God, we're all so flawed and awful. That's what this has taught me. Everyone sucks. There's 9 ways to suck, and you're one of them. Except for a 9. The 9 doesn't suck.
9s are great.
Yeah.
It is the motivation thing. It really puts it in like, you know, you can be like, oh, it's all these traits, and you can sort of think what you will of it. But then when it comes down to this core motivation, it's like it lands with a real thud.
Yeah. Oof.
Yeah.
We're all just little animals.
Yeah. Your basic desire to be capable and competent.
Ugh,
like it's
so annoying. Everyone's so annoying. God.
Is that the conclusion of this Dear Shandy
I can think of 9 reasons why everyone's so annoying.
That was really interesting. She was great.
She was great. That was like, as I said, that could have gone on for 6 hours.
And I've got to say, based on my, you know, people are curious about my Enneagram based on my writing, which is predominantly Bachelor recaps. Mm-hmm. And based on that, I can see why they would want to know you feel like you know a lot about a person based on how they write and how they think.
Yeah.
And I want to know the numbers of all my friends now.
Totally. I think everyone should read this book. I'm not even plugging it. I literally think everyone should read this book so that they can judge everyone and figure out what they are. And
yeah. Well, you just sort of are able to put yourself in the other person's shoes and not just in a circumstantial way. Like, oh, based on this scenario, I'm going to put myself in your shoes. It's more so, this is your overriding.
It's like a roadmap.
Reason.
It's like a roadmap. It's like an instruction manual for humans.
A roadmap. Good job, Andy.
Did it. Nailed it.
On that note,
I think we're good.
I think we can wrap this episode of Dear Shandy.
Yeah, go back to our 4 or 5 life of neuroses and feeling of lack of self-worth.
And cerebralness.
Is
that a word?
Sure. It could be. Cerebrality.
If cerebrality is a word, that's just annoying. Like English
Cerebrality.
No.
I still don't know English. It's amazing.
Yeah, it has to be cerebralness. I refuse to accept anything else.
We will get to the bottom of this probably after this podcast.
After this podcast, when you all tune in and you're like, I can't even say it.
The only comments will be like cerebralness, cerebrality.
Learn how to speak English.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of Dear Shandy. Hopefully you learned something about yourself.
Hope so.
Or you feel inspired to. If you guys liked what you heard today, you know what I'm going to ask of you. If you could like, subscribe, leave an iTunes review, hit the notification bell, do all the things that you would do to support a baby podcast. And on that note, I think we're done. See you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.
Dear Shandy.